Hi, my name is Paul Rhodes, and today I'm going to discuss the Insights Discovery profile with a focus on the two graphs that you get at the back of your profile. The page number will change depending on which profile you've got, but generally you'll find this at the back of the profile. And I'm also going to talk about the Insights Discovery 72 type wheel, where you've got a couple of dots floating around. And so I just want to help you understand what these mean when you get your profile. So let's start with the Insights Discovery, as they call it, color dynamics, or the charts or graphs you get at the back of your profile. So this is an example profile. It's just a discovery profile you can get from our website and download if you want to see what a profile is like and see all the chapters. So it's nobody's personal profile. It's just a random one that we have created. And on the sorry, let me just get back to that. As I'm looking at my screen, on the right hand side we have what is called the less conscious persona, and on the left hand side, as I'm looking at my screen, is the conscious persona. So when we talk about the conscious versus the less conscious, we talk about the work face being more the conscious persona, and this is generally within an insights training session the persona that we will focus on, the chart that we'll focus on within your profile. But it's important to understand what the less conscious persona means. We discuss this as being, imagine you're at a wedding and someone's taking a photo of you, but you don't know that they're taking the photo of you. And we would suggest then, because of that, it's kind of you in a more relaxed state. You're more switched off. It might suggest that this is what you are like in a state when you're maybe at home with your feet up, watching a bit of TV and just chilling out. So this is what we would refer to as you're less conscious. You're not maybe consciously engaging in any of the energies outside of just your normal personality and your normal preferences. So you can see this person here has a very strong preference for fiery red, 95%. And actually at home there's not really a huge preference for anything else, which is quite common for the less conscious persona. That's quite a common profile, but this would be very uncommon for conscious persona, because we normally, as you can see over here, draw on more than one energy, although there are certain personality types called focused personalities that do draw on just one energy in a work environment as well, or in a conscious persona. But most of the time with this work face on, and when you think of a persona, when I say work face, think of some of those TV shows like Pride and Prejudice or Bridgerton, where they're putting masks over their face and they're going to those grand balls, and that mask is a persona. And I guess it's not a negative thing, it's just that's what we do when we come to work. Sometimes it's because of the job we're in or the people we work with, but we choose to dial up different color energies, different kind of personality preferences. And so what you see here is the difference between maybe a more relaxed state at home potentially to a more work focused state. So we call this the conscious persona. Now, why we do say it's a conscious persona, remember, a lot of what we do is actually subconscious, and so it's behavior that we've been doing over and over and over again for a long period of time. So when we call it the conscious persona, a lot of this behavior does actually occur unconsciously, but we're doing it in a conscious way, in the sense that we've decided at some stage during our careers that this is the way we like to operate in a work environment. That's the idea. The preference flow in the middle is literally the difference between our less conscious and our conscious. So let's say, for example, you sit at home and you're having your breakfast, you're not really thinking about much, you listen to the news or you're reading the newspaper, you're having a cup of coffee, you walk out the door, and then you walk into the work environment, or you go to your computer, you turn your computer on and you switch into work mode. And what this person's doing is actually drawing on yellow and blue energy. And so, I'm presuming at this stage, by the time you've read this, you know what these energies are. So we can see that we're going from 43 to 73%. And so this individual is not really using a huge amount of yellow in a less conscious way. So at home they might have dialed that down. It's 43%. But at work they're really switching that energy on. So they've got a far larger, more of a preference, 73% preference, to be showing those yellow energy characteristics like enthusiasm and connection, and so they can be quite people orientated using this yellow energy. And when they come home, maybe they don't need to, maybe the environment doesn't ask for it, but they're kind of dialing that down. And this line here, where it's got the three, what we call the midline, this would suggest on both of these charts anything below the midline, you're less inclined than you are more inclined to use that characteristic. So for example, in a work environment, this individual is more inclined, they have more of a preference to use the sunshine yellow characteristics than they do in a more relaxed state where they have lesser an inclination. It doesn't mean you're not using it, it just means it's not such a preference in a home state. And that's just reflected here in your preference flow. So when I come to work, literally I'm just dialing up on some of that yellow energy, which at home I'm not really needing to do, or I have no desire to do. And the same thing with blue. Blue, you can see, is quite low in a relaxed state, 27%, and over here it's dialing right up another 30% to 57%. So in a work state, in a conscious state, I've got more of a preference to use that, and that's probably driven again by the kind of job that I've got might demand that I'm a bit more process driven and so on and so forth. So that's reflected here in my conscious preference flow, my preference flow, where you can see that's on the increase. Now my fiery red 95 and 93 is pretty much the same. Again, reflected there, and 7% and 5%, both very, very low. Again, that's reflected there. You're not really seeing much. It's actually dipping down by a couple of percent. So these are the two for me. Now, some of you are going to have charts that are going to be very even. They're not really doing too much, which would suggest you're not really changing that much when you're switching on to come to work. Some of you, all of them will be going up, which is kind of normal, because when you think about it, we sort of switch ourselves on at work a little bit more, so we might be a bit more of a preference to use all of these energies at work. Some of you, it'll be a little bit up and down, and so some energies are going up, some energies are going down, but literally it's a difference between your more relaxed state and a more conscious work face. So that's hopefully helping you understand these. Of course, I'm presuming, again, you already know what fiery red, sunshine yellow, earth green and cool blue are, so we know what these represent as far as personality traits. So I won't go into that at this stage. What I would say is this midline is important in where you are going to end up on this 72 type wheel. So the 72 type wheel, and there is no better or worse spot to be, but I just want to help you understand a little bit about this wheel and why your dots where they are. So some of you will have a wheel that looks like this. This person here has got a bright dot, which is close to the center, and they've got a light dot, which is further out to the edge. Now, it's not because it's bright or light that it's further out or close to the center. These could actually be the opposite, and I'll explain what these are. What I would say is some of you might only have one dot, and where you've only got one dot, the reality is you've actually got two dots, but they're on top of each other, so you're not moving. And let me help you understand why you've got these dots. It's based around your chart. So on our conscious persona, you can see I have fiery red as my dominant energy, quite dominant, 93%. I have a strong preference at 73% for sunshine yellow, so I'm showing a lot of extroverted kind of energy. But I've also got a preference, so I'm more inclined to use cool blue at 57% than I am less inclined, which would be 43%. And so you can see here that all three of these are above the midline, which means in a work environment, drawing on my conscious persona, I've actually got a preference to use all three of these. I have a very low preference for green, but all three. Now, because I've got three above the midline, that is going to be represented on your chart by, you will be positioned in the inner circle here. We call this an accommodating personality because they tend to accommodate the other colors a little bit more. So think of it like a chameleon. So this person is definitely dominant fiery red, but we've found that they can jump around to the yellow. It's not too much of a journey for them to come, and also they can come into the cool blue. Now both of those are next door neighbors to the fiery red, so it kind of makes sense that they can do that. Still a little bit of a journey over here to the to the earth green, and again we would need to combine looking at this with looking at your charts, and definitely for this person it's a real journey. For some people, if that was up at 49%, you would still be in the same position. So although you'll get two people in exactly the same spot, we do also need to take into consideration, sorry, I keep jumping the wrong one, what that percentage is. So although that is 5%, another person might be 49%, they're still going to be in the same position here on the wheel. So again, we don't want to be putting people in boxes, and we know human beings are quite complex, and although you are on the same dot as somebody else, you might be completely different than them in lots of different ways, but it would indicate that you'd share your preference sets. Now, for those of you who don't have three above the line. Let's say, for example, that blue sneaks below the line and you've got the yellow and the red above the line. We would call this a classic personality type. And you will find, if that is you, that your personality will be in this middle circle. So 3 above the line on your conscious persona, that will be your bright dot, will be in the middle. 2 above the line on your conscious persona will put you in here in a classic. Now, if that was just yellow and red, you'd probably be here a bit further out. So again, easier to access this yellow, but not so easy to access the blue and the green. Or if the blue and the red, you'd probably find yourself slipping a bit more up here. Easy to access the blue and the red. More of a preference there. Doesn't mean you can't access this, just means it's a bit more of a journey for you to come down here. So basically, if you have 3 above the line, you're accommodating. 2 above the line, you're a classic personality type and you'll be in the middle circle. If your conscious persona looks like this and you've only got 1 above the line, which we find only 2 or 3% of people who have profiles completed are that kind of personality type, then you would be a focused personality and you would be like our less conscious persona out here. You'd be what we call right on the edge. So strong on one color, but it's a bit of a journey for you to go anywhere. So again, not many people sit there. Depending when we look at the statistics with the Insight profiles, around about 60 to 65% of you will sit in this classic. Around about 30 to 35% of you will be accommodating personalities. It's fair to say that people who are either focused or classic personalities are sometimes easier to recognize than people that would sit in the middle, because people sitting in the middle are pretty comfortable using all 3 of those energies. They have a strong preference to in this case, using red, blue, and yellow. So maybe a little bit harder for me to spot any strengths or definite. If I'm, for example, red and yellow, it's a bit easy for me to spot that, and I might not have an inclination to be blue or green. So definitely seeing that extroversion come out. But with this character, you'll see them slip into that introverted called blue. So it might be harder for me to recognize them, and what you find is a chameleon-like personality. These accommodators will shift into different energies depending on the nature of the interaction or what's going on at work. So you'll see, myself drawing on those different energies during the day. So, or if I'm further out here, I'm probably going to be more dominant to use fiery red and sunshine yellow more often. So that is how you'll get these charts linking up to the 72 type wheel. One little extra thing I'd say is these grey areas are really interesting. We call these in Insight's creative types. Now if you find yourself in a grey area, that means that in your charts you might, for example, have the red below the line and you'd have the blue and the yellow above the line. We'd have the blue and the yellow below the line, and you'd have the green and the red above the line. And so you've got a preference to use fiery red, but also you've got a preference to use earth green. Or you've got a preference to use cool blue, and you've got a preference to use sunshine yellow. Now this is kind of unique. We find maybe 1 or 2% of people have profiles like this, depending on when we do it. And it's unique because you're opposite. So let's say, for example, the red was below the line, didn't really have a preference for the red or the green, but you had a strong preference for blue and yellow. That's a little bit unusual because blue and yellow are polar opposites, and often we find that personalities tend to you see blue and yellow are above the line, but that's because the red energy is your dominant. So I'm slipping into there, but I'm also slipping into there. So I'm sharing the extroversion, and I'm sharing the thinking preference, but there's no preference sets that, for example, this yellow is an extroverted feeler and this is an introverted thinker. So we're not sharing any preference sets there. So you find that is a little bit unique. And if that is you, you'll probably find yourselves in one of these grey areas. And it means that you can slip from, say, for example, fiery red and be comfortable. You have a preference for it, and actually come over here and just be as comfortable with an earth green. It's kind of like being ambidextrous in a way. It's like you're comfortable, writing with your right hand, but actually you're also very comfortable writing with your left hand, and we know that that's kind of rare. So it's much more common that, for example, I sit here, I'm very common with my fire red, very comfortable here. I have a preference for, and I also have a strong preference for sunshine yellow, but they both share the extroversion preference. So over here I've got no preferences that I'm sharing. So quite a journey, and yet if you do come across someone like this, they can be a little bit hard to pick as far as personality goes, definitely within this wheel. So again, you might not come across it as rare. It doesn't mean you're extra special or extra not special. It just means that that's your unique personality. And so that is how you will find you've got the less conscious persona here, the conscious, the work face here, the preference for literally. That's the difference between the two. This midline represents either 3, 2, or 1 above the midline, and that's going to be driving whether you're an accommodating, a classic, or a focused personality. Some of you may be creative types. You're going to have 2 dots, but if your dots are in the same position, then they're going to be on top of each other. And so, for example, you can see lead by red, followed by yellow, then by green, and then underneath there is blue, then underneath is green. If that was exactly the same here, even if the percentages were different, but if everything else is the same, I had the red, the yellow, and the blue above the line and the green below the bottom line. It wouldn't matter what the percentages were, and they were in that order, then these will be on top of each other. So if you've only got 1 dot, that's why. Hopefully that helps you understand your 72 type wheel, which will come out as one of these the 8 types. I'm 24, so I'm a motivator. What are you? Down here, hopefully that's helped you understand the Insights Discovery color dynamics and helps you understand why your charts are saying what they're saying. So anyone's got any questions, feel free, you can drop us an email, info@7institute.co.uk. Enjoy.